Hey there besties, welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to continue the recap of the manhwa Lucia. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoy the video because it really helps our channel grow. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. The soft patter of rain outside the castle filled the air as Lucia sat indoors, enjoying a cup of hot tea served by Jerome. Has it been a month already? She pondered quietly, reflecting on the past month since her marriage to Duke Hugo as she sipped her tea thoughtfully. Memories of the Duke flooded her mind. Absorbed in her thoughts, Lucia hardly noticed the steam rising from her cup, her mind wandering in the quiet of the castle. "I'm bored," she thought. Breaking the silence, Jerome gently inquired about her dinner preferences for the evening, his faint smile inviting conversation. Lucia responded with her usual polite indifference, prompting Jerome's curiosity about her serene demeanor. Observing Lucia's calm disposition, Jerome marveled at how effortlessly she had adapted to her role as lady of the house. Initially apprehensive about a princess assuming the position of duchess, Jerome's concerns dissolved as he came to know Lucia better. Suddenly the tranquility of the moment was shattered by the clamor of approaching carriages. Startled, Lucia turned to Jerome for answers, puzzled by the commotion outside. Jerome, visibly tense, struggled to maintain his composure as he peered out the window. "The master has returned," Jerome informed Lucia, his tone strained as she jolted up stunned. Concern etched on his face, he cautioned her against rushing out to greet Duke Hugo. Confused by Jerome's choice of words, Lucia sought clarification, her brow furrowed in concern. "I simply mean that I am worried the lady might be shocked," Jerome reassured her, his smile strained. Aware of the delicate nature of Duke Hugo's return, he urged Lucia to exercise caution in her interactions with him, mindful of his sensitivity. "He will head straight for a bath, so it would be better to go see him afterwards," Jerome advised Lucia quietly. "I see," Lucia responded, her mind abuzz with thoughts and questions about Duke Hugo's prolonged absence and the affairs of the territory. Snippets of conversations overheard from passing knights hinted at unrest and the involvement of the Duke in a recent incident. "Is it about the native tribes?" Lucia wondered to herself, nibbling on a cookie as she contemplated the implications of the rumors she had heard. Aware of the historical conflicts between the Northern Territory and the native tribes, Lucia reflected on the recent peace and the sudden resurgence of tension. "How could I have forgotten?" she mused, watching raindrops streak down the windowpane as memories of Duke Hugo's formidable reputation as a warrior surfaced in her mind. "He used to be called the Black Lionel of the battlefield," she thought, casting a shadow over her thoughts. As Duke Hugo strode gallantly into the castle, Jerome greeted him with a respectful bow, his demeanor betraying a subtle unease in the presence of the formidable Duke. "I am glad to see you alive and well, Your Excellency," Jerome greeted him, the staff lined up behind him as he turned and just stared at him. After the exchange, Jerome couldn't help but notice the transformation in Duke Hugo's demeanor. "No matter how many times I experience it, I will never get used to that murderous energy of his," Jerome thought to himself, a tremor of tension evident in his demeanor. "I have prepared a bath for you," he said to him. Acknowledging Jerome's service, Duke Hugo inquired about any developments during his absence, to which Jerome responded with a brief report, assuring the Duke of Lucia's well-being and explaining his decision to discourage her from greeting him immediately. Satisfied with the information, Duke Hugo instructed Jerome to convene a meeting in 1 hour, signaling his intent to address matters of importance promptly as he continued his purposeful stride through the hallway. Jerome bowed respectfully, affirming, "Yes, Your Excellency." Despite the absence of imminent threats, he could postpone the meeting upon his return. However, he did inquire about her upon his arrival, which is unusual, Jerome mused, recalling Duke Hugo's instructions to treat Lucia with respect as the Lady of Taran. "I didn't misinterpret his words after all. I wonder if Fabian has reached the capital," he pondered, contemplating the potential repercussions of recent events, including the loss of lives, aware of the difficulties Fabian would face explaining the casualties to the king. As he wondered, it would be nice if the lady could soften the master's temperament, even just a little bit. Is that too much to hope for? At the dining table, Lucia sat quietly with Jerome beside her. He must be occupied if he's holding a meeting immediately after his return, even dining in the conference room, Lucia thought silently. I hadn't expected us to be close, but can't we at least dine together? She lamented, inwardly poking at her food, lacking appetite that day for unknown reasons. Is something wrong with the food, my lady? Jerome inquired, puzzled. It's not the food, Jerome. I'm just not hungry today, Lucia explained softly, a departure from her usual habit of finishing her meals. I will be excused, she declared as she rose to leave. Shall I prepare some tea for you, then? Jerome offered. No, thank you. I think I'll spend some time in the library, so I'll have tea later, Lucia replied with a faint smile, excusing herself from the table. Later in the library, Lucia finished a book. It's a bit dull at times, but it's all right overall. Perhaps I should explore more books by this author, she considered, using reading as a distraction. She marveled at the vastness and organization of Taran's library. If there were a library of my dreams, wouldn't this be it, she mused, finding a book she was looking for but struggling to reach it on a high shelf. If only there were a ladder, she sighed, stretching to reach it. Just a little bit more, she thought. As if in response, a voice spoke up, offering assistance. This one, a taller individual asked, reaching for the book on her behalf, shocking her. She realized, with a blend of familiarity and strangeness, that she had missed him and had been waiting for him without consciously acknowledging it. Here, he said, handing the book to her with a gesture that screamed awkwardness silently, causing her to blush. Grateful for his help, she accepted the book, quickly retreating to the opposite side of the room, her cheeks flushing red. Thank you, she managed, stuttering. Internally, Lucia grappled with how to proceed. Was the meeting over? Had he just arrived the library? Should I inquire about his trip first? Her thoughts raced as her heartbeat accelerated. How on earth should I open up a conversation, she thought, while the Duke just stared at her. Breaking the silence, Duke Hugo expressed regret for not visiting her sooner upon his return. That's all right, you must have been busy, Lucia responded, still avoiding his gaze. Is the meeting over? She added, attempting to grasp the flow of the conversation. For today, Duke Hugo confirmed. Lucia remarked on the grandeur of the castle, noting its vastness. Duke Hugo assured her that with time, she would become accustomed to navigating only the necessary areas. Yes, I guess so, Lucia replied softly, closing her eyes briefly, unable to meet his gaze. Duke Hugo shifted the topic, mentioning hearing that she hadn't finished her dinner. Lucia reassured him that the meal was enjoyable, praising the chef's skills. It's just... I can't always have a huge appetite every day, Lucia murmured, her emotions swirling as she kept her gaze fixed on the floor. Are you saying you lost your appetite today? Duke Hugo inquired, his tone gentle but probing. Oh, a little bit, Lucia admitted shyly, still avoiding eye contact. Has someone upset you? Duke Hugo's expression turned stern, his concern evident. What? No, everyone is very kind, Lucia replied, still refusing to meet his gaze as her heart raced. Duke Hugo fell silent, puzzled by Lucia's behavior. Gently he reached out, caressing her hair, inhaling her fragrance before pressing a soft kiss to her hair. Look at me, he requested, his tone gentle yet commanding. Initially puzzled, Lucia slowly raised her head to meet Duke Hugo's gaze, her blush deepening. Holding her hair, Duke Hugo locked eyes with her. Do you feel uncomfortable when you're with me? He asked softly. I don't feel uncomfortable, just a bit flustered, Lucia confessed, her cheeks burning. Why? Duke Hugo's curiosity was evident. I can't help being awkward, but Your Excellency doesn't seem to feel that way at all, even though we haven't seen each other for a month, Lucia explained. Are you nagging me for being gone for a month? Duke Hugo teased playfully, a hint of romance in his voice. That's not what I meant, Lucia protested, flustered. Duke Hugo's smirk was evident as he continued to hold her hair, his gaze unwavering. That's not what you meant, he retorted as her blush deepened further. Releasing her hair, Duke Hugo gently tilted her chin, leaning in to kiss her deeply. Lost in the moment, the book slipped from her hand as she succumbed to their passion. Moans escaped her lip as Duke Hugo trailed kisses down her neck, igniting a whirlwind of emotions within her. Suddenly, Duke Hugo lifted her up as he kissed her bosom, eliciting a seductive scream. Carrying her to an inner room tucked away in the library, Lucia's confusion intensified. As he dropped her onto the bed, carrying her to an inner room tucked away in the library, Lucia's confusion grew. As he dropped her on the bed, her astonishment grew even more profound. Wait, this is a bedroom in the library? She wondered, having never noticed it before. Their passion reignited, Duke Hugo continued to shower Lucia with kisses, her responses matching his intensity as she moaned. Lucia's mind raced with the realization of their surroundings, unable to control the escalating situation. Are we really going to do it here? Right now, she thought, her pulse quickening with uncertainty. In the midst of the burgeoning romantic tension, Lucia interjected, prompting Duke Hugo to momentarily halt. Despite his inability to contain himself, he leaned in for another kiss as Lucia gently repelled him. I said wait, she murmured softly. First I need a bath. I've already had one, Duke Hugo responded. It's me I'm referring to, Lucia clarified, her cheeks coloring with self-consciousness. I don't mind, replied Duke Hugo, drawing nearer once again. But I do, Lucia insisted, her eyes beseeching. Please, Your Excellency, I meant Hugh. Taking a moment to consider, Duke Hugo ceased his advances and assisted Lucia to her feet. Swiftly she exited the library, leaving Duke Hugo to voice his frustration alone. My head is in a whirl, he thought, rising from his position. Up until this point I've been unwavering in my decisions. Once I set a plan, I followed it through. According to my original schedule, I should be surveying the Northern Territory right now, yet here I am, having abandoned a 6-month plan to return to Rome. Spotting a book Lucia had left behind, he picked it up. Her image haunts me at all hours, an incessant torture. Why can't she be dismissed from my thoughts? He pondered, his tension palpable. Considering she had intended to read the book, he contemplated placing it on a table for her easy discovery, all while leafing through its pages thoughtfully. I've always detested unauthorized entry into my library, yet her presence here stirred no anger in me. On the contrary, I found myself nearly losing all semblance of control, he reflected, recalling their near intimacy. As he sat pondering why Lucia alone captivated him so, he realized agreeing to her proposal of marriage was out of character from the start. She represents an unforeseen variance in my life. Shortly thereafter, Jerome's knock interrupted his musings. Entering the room, Jerome confessed to permitting Lucia's library visit without prior approval. Curious, Duke Hugo inquired about Jerome's view of Lucia's suitability as a duchess. Initially reluctant, Jerome conceded that Lucia was well regarded, surprising Duke Hugo with the positivity of his feedback, especially given Jerome's typically reserved judgment of the Duke's romantic interests. She is the epitome of a dignified duchess, Jerome observed, noting her respectful treatment of others and her clear communication of her preferences, devoid of unnecessary criticism. Indeed? Duke Hugo replied, taken aback. It seems she possesses a knack for managing people, despite her youth, he thought, intrigued. Inquiring after Lucia's current location, Duke Hugo noticed Jerome's puzzled expression. Meanwhile, Lucia was indulging in a leisurely bath, attended by her handmaidens. My lady, how is your skin so soft? One handmaiden marveled, astounded by Lucia's smooth complexion. Even without oil, your skin remains silky. It's softer than a baby's, another added, delighting in the bath ritual. Embarrassed by the fuss, Lucia felt puzzled, especially with the addition of petals to her bath. If only I could boast half your skin's beauty, a handmaiden remarked, smiling. Despite the praise, Lucia harbored a sense of inadequacy, lamenting her lack of conventional beauty and figure. I'd need the allure of someone like Sophia Lawrence to capture the Duke's attention, yet he even spurned her, she sighed, reminiscing. Lucia found solace in a dream wherein Duke Hugo showed his wife the basic courtesies at official gatherings. At least there's the comfort of his respect, she concluded, somewhat reassured as her bathing ritual concluded and her handmaidens dressed her. Entering the room, the handmaidens and Lucia blushed with anxiety at the unexpected presence of Duke Hugo, who was seated in a chair with a glass of wine in hand. Lucia, feeling a tinge of embarrassment, wondered why he was already in the bedroom. As her handmaidens excused themselves with giggles, Lucia couldn't help but feel a sense of unease about potential gossip circulating the castle the next day. Duke Hugo's gaze fixed on Lucia as she approached, causing her to try to maintain a facade of calm. "I thought that my memories of our first night had faded away, but I was just being arrogant," he thought as he stared at her. "Would you like some wine?" He offered a glass to her. Accepting his offer of wine, Lucia hoped it might help ease her nerves, even if just a little. Downing the glass in one gulp, her reaction to the bitterness was evident on her face, much to Duke Hugo's amusement. Offered a refill, Lucia accepted, feeling a slight blush creeping onto her cheeks as she anticipated what might follow. Duke Hugo's gaze at her then intensified as he drew her closer for a kiss, eliciting a moan from her. As he took her hand to retrieve the glass while still kissing her, he inquired about her enjoyment of wine. Stammering slightly, Lucia admitted to enjoying it on special occasions, her words faltering as Duke Hugo's grin widened. Their intimacy deepened as they shared more kisses, with Duke Hugo's hand moving to her bosom as they both became more involved in the moment. However, Duke Hugo sensed Lucia's nervousness and halted their progress. "You're trembling," he said to her, leaving her speechless. Reassuring her that there was no need to be afraid and emphasizing the importance of her comfort and enjoyment. Confused by her struggling, he lifted her and carried her to the bed, his concern evident as he sought to ensure her well-being before proceeding further. She remained silent as Duke Hugo guided her to the bed, where he lay beside her, enfolding her in his embrace. Lucia, finding solace in his gentle touch, felt her trembling gradually subside. Duke Hugo, lost in his own thoughts, regretted his actions back then, sensing that Lucia might have formed a negative perception of him. Observing her vulnerability, he pondered over her typically confident demeanor and felt unsettled by her trembling. He wished fervently for her comfort and ease, realizing his newfound feelings for her were unprecedented. In their shared stillness, Lucia couldn't help but wonder about their intended intimacy, perplexed by Duke Hugo's apparent lack of initiative. She reasoned that his presence in the bedroom might be a gesture to maintain appearances of marital harmony. Despite feeling considerate towards her, Lucia couldn't shake off her doubts and insecurities. Questioning whether her previous refusal had influenced Duke Hugo's reluctance, Lucia wondered about their future interactions. "Are we not going to do it? I don't like that we are not doing it for some reason," she thought as she squeezed her hands together. Duke Hugo, roused from his contemplation, "You're not really sleeping, are you?" he asked as he assured Lucia softly that his intentions weren't to lull her to sleep. His response offered Lucia a glimpse of understanding, albeit leaving her lingering uncertainties unresolved. "Are you tired?" Duke Hugo asked Lucia gently. "I'm fine, but you must be tired," Lucia replied. "As soon as you got back, you had to go to the meeting." "I'm not tired at all," Duke Hugo assured her as he touched her hand. "I want to hold you." "Do you want that too?" he said as he kissed her hand softly. "What?" Lucia exclaimed, looking confused as she blushed. "I'm saying I want to have sex with you," he clarified, gazing at her with burning desire. "Was the first night that horrible?" Duke Hugo asked, showing concern towards her as he came atop her. "Well," Lucia began, then stopped abruptly, her gaze drawn to the Duke's sparkling eyes as he blushed. "Since he looks like this, somehow I feel like I've become an amazing beauty," she thought to herself. "It will be different this time," Duke Hugo assured her. Not uttering a word, Lucia couldn't help but stare into his eyes. "I can't trust you, you lied to me the last time," Lucia said awkwardly as she avoided his gaze. "I definitely said that it would hurt if it was your first time." Duke Hugo's expression turned sad. "You said it would hurt a bit, but it really hurt a lot," Lucia told him. The Duke's expression softened. So give me a chance to make up for it, he said, reaching for her hand to touch his face. He now understood that Lucia was quite delicate. Do you plan to never do it again? Duke Hugo asked Lucia as he was desperate to have intercourse with her. Lucia blushed and laughed softly, unable to speak. That depends on how it goes today, as she finally revealed, feeling a desire to be with him. Duke Hugo grinned happily. You really know how to tease me, he confessed to her. He took every step slowly this time, not wanting to upset her. He plants soft kisses on her neck as they slip under the sheets. Clasping her hands together with his, he enters her in a slow, rhythmic manner. It doesn't hurt, right? Duke Hugo asks, maintaining his gentle pace. Lucia, overwhelmed by pleasant sensations, closes her eyes and simply enjoys the moment. If it's too much, tell me. I'll move slower, he offers, the creaking of the bed growing louder with each movement. Ah, wait, Lucia suddenly says amidst her quiet enjoyment. Ah, as she exclaims, stopping his movements as she gazes at him seductively. Lucia's hair sprawled on the bed as she sensed this intercourse was different from their first, as both were entangled with each other in a way that felt deeper and more intense. The next morning, Lucia wakes up startled, her mind still reeling from the intensity of their intercourse. I fell asleep without realizing it, she thought, feeling a bit anxious. The sun is already so bright. What time is it, she wonders, finding herself under the sheets with her husband cuddling her. Duke Hugo squeezes her lightly and pecks her on her neck, eliciting a soft moan from Lucia as he prepares her for another encounter. Ah, Your Excellency, Lucia stutters, turning to look at him. My name, Duke Hugo whispers seductively. Hugh, let me go, Lucia says softly. I don't want to, Duke Hugo says, resuming where he left off. Your Excellency. I meant Hugh. It's morning. Lucia begins, her voice tinged with urgency, but Duke Hugo pays no heed, entering her from behind. Lucia, unable to resist, succumbs once more to the consuming waves of pleasure. It's morning, she says, her voice trembling with a mixture of surprise and desire, but the Duke persisted. Lucia finally savored every touch as she surrenders to the overwhelming pleasure coursing through her, allowing herself to be consumed by the moment. As time passes, the afternoon sun filters through the windows. Lucia slept soundly after their second intercourse, her breathing steady and peaceful. Duke Hugo gazes at her tenderly, unable to resist the impulse as he embraces her gently, finally admitting to himself that he may have truly lost his senses in the whirlwind of emotions. Every morning, Lucia rises late and is assisted by her handmaidens as she dresses. She takes breakfast alone, often dozing off afterward. Lunchtime arrives soon after, and she may take leisurely walks or indulge in reading. Dinner is always shared with Duke Hugo, who consistently joins her in the evening meal. After her nightly bath, she spends the night with him, often feeling exhausted after their shared intimacy. As another morning dawns, Lucia reflects on her routine. Despite her weariness, she rises from bed with a resigned acceptance of Duke Hugo's fervent advances. It's been about a month since he's been flinging himself at me like a beast every night. Thanks to that, the people who had always been kind to me now become flustered as soon as they see me. I guess there's no greater power than a husband's love. Since this happens every day, I'm not even embarrassed anymore. I guess this must be progress, but it's getting warm now, so I wish he would only leave marks where they're not visible, she thought. Lucia acknowledges that she could refuse Duke Hugo's advances if she wished, but she finds herself not entirely opposed to them. Admitting her desire for him, she gazes out at the neglected garden, contemplating trying her hand at gardening, realizing she has ample time on her hands. In my dream, if I didn't work, I couldn't eat. So it feels strange to do nothing but relax every day, as she muses. Reflecting on her time as a countess, Lucia ponders the absence of obligations in her current life, questioning the purpose of her days after a lifetime filled with social events and fulfilling responsibilities. This introspection prompts her to delve into deeper self-inquiry. She had heard that other noble ladies spent their time arranging flowers or embroidering, but she had never learned such skills. As a 16th princess who grew up alone in a forgotten castle, Lucia lacked guidance in such traditional activities. Instead, she found solace in reading and taking walks. Jerome interrupts her reverie with an envelope, surprising her. "This is an internal budget," Lucia remarks, scanning its contents with curiosity and apprehension. "Yes, my lady," Jerome affirmed with a warm smile. This budget was not previously managed, so it took some time to write it up. Employment expenses and basic costs of running the castle are covered under separate budgets, thus not included here. "This is a new budget entirely at your discretion to plan," he emphasized. Perplexed by its purpose, Lucia questioned Jerome about its intended use. She understood that traditionally the lady of the house managed the household's livelihood, including expenses to support her husband. However, this internal budget was different. It was solely hers to manage as she saw fit, as long as she stayed within the allocated amount Jerome implied. "That means," as she mused, "it's labeled an internal budget, but in essence it's solely my own money, and the sum is quite substantial," she thought. The allocation of funds to Lucia was significant, signaling the end of her days of leisure. Though inwardly she groaned at the prospect, it resembled operational expenses for a business, underscoring her commitment to deliver tangible results. She acknowledged that the privileges she enjoyed inherently entailed corresponding duties, compelling her to demonstrate competence and effectiveness. Lucia outlines her priorities to Jerome and later shares her garden plans with Duke Hugo. She then asks the Duke if it's permissible for her to oversee the garden, questioning whether it was his decision not to plant flowers in the garden. Duke Hugo, carrying her to bed, reassures her, "The garden falls under the authority of the lady of the house. You may do as you wish." As they retire to bed, Lucia discusses the initial steps required for the garden project. "First, we need to hire someone to design and plan the entire garden," she suggests. "It'll involve quite a few workers initially, so there'll be frequent comings and goings for a while. It might be a bit inconvenient," she warns Duke Hugo, preparing him for the activity. "Do you need more funds?" Duke Hugo asked. "What?" Lucia exclaims, surprised. "I can increase your budget, but not by much. Since this year's budget was already finalized, I allocated as much as I could for your provisional budget," Duke Hugo explains. "No, that's not what I meant. It's already more than enough," Lucia assures him. She reflects on her assumption that as a duke he could easily provide such large sums, realizing the effort he put into securing the funds. He really went through a lot of trouble, she thought, acknowledging that it far surpassed the internal budget she received from Count Mitten. The head of the house has the authority to determine the scale of the internal budget. If a husband and wife have a good relationship, the internal budget will naturally be increased. On the other hand, if the husband wants a divorce, the first thing he'll do is decrease the internal budget, she ponders. "If I look at it that way, I guess the Duke is quite satisfied with me," she thought. "I mentioned it because I was concerned you might be annoyed by the frequent activity in the garden. Especially since I wandered in there without any particular purpose," Lucia clarified to the Duke. She has never tended a garden, not even when she was a countess, the thought lingered in her mind. Gardens demand significant investment, and Count Mittens despised such expenditures. What if the Duke shares the same disdain? Lucia pondered, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I told you the garden is under your authority. Hundreds of people come and go through Rome every day. It's not like there will be thousands and thousands of workers, so why does it matter?" Duke Hugo reassures her. "You can cut down all the trees, demolish everything and make a pond, do whatever you want," the Duke tells his wife, assuring her of her authority. "You don't need to ask for my permission for something like that," the Duke tells her while kneeling. Lucia gazes at him, feeling a bit touched. "I'm not sure what I can do freely and what I need to ask permission for," she confesses. "How far can I go?" she asked him. Duke Hugo reached out to her face as they lay side by side. He prompts her with a question, "How far are you willing to go?" Lucia, initially stunned, perceives an opportunity in his sudden attentiveness. This might be an opportunity. It's evidence that he's satisfied with me in bed. Surely I can leverage this to my advantage regardless of what I choose to say. But Lucia contemplated. I'm asking you because I'm not sure myself. As you re-aware, I lacked proper education, so I'm unsure of the expectations placed on a duchess, Lucia tells him softly. She understands that greed would only lead to greater greed, potentially resulting in disaster. So I want to learn those things, she said to the Duke, resolving not to succumb to greed. She recognizes that as long as she is the Duchess, she is guaranteed wealth and honor for the rest of her life. There's nothing more she could wish for, Lucia reflects. You mean you need a teacher? Duke Hugo asks. I should have thought of that first, he reproaches himself. There are no elders in the Taran house who can advise her. On top of that, she has no proper family of her own either. Of course, she has no opportunity to learn anything, Duke Hugo quickly realizes. I'll look into it, he said, making Lucia delighted. Thank you, Lucia responds, smiling, catching the Duke off guard as his heart raced. This is troubling, he thought as he sighed, feeling like a wild animal driven solely by instinct, leaving Lucia speechless. Vivian, Duke Hugo calls out seductively as he leans in for a kiss. This is really bad, she thought. Lucia's loud moans filled the room as she called out his name. With each movement, the bed creaked louder. Duke Hugo moved swiftly and rhythmically, lost in thought. I wonder why, whenever she calls my name, everything seems to blur, he pondered silently as their passionate encounter continued uninterrupted. Lucia breathed heavily as their intimate encounter persisted, her moans filling the air. Duke Hugo paused midway, his question directed at her amidst their shared passion. Do you enjoy being here? He inquired, his voice breaking the moment. What? Lucia mumbled amidst her pleasure. I'm asking if you've grown accustomed to living here, Duke Hugo clarified. Oh, that. Yes, Lucia responded curtly, her brevity leaving Duke Hugo momentarily speechless. Don't grow too attached. Once everything is settled in the territory, we'll return to the capital, Duke Hugo informed her, causing her to flinch. The capital? Lucia was taken by surprise. She knew that her father, the king, was nearing the end of his life. Her older brother, the crown prince, would soon ascend the throne. The crown prince shared a close relationship with Duke Taran. It was inevitable that if he became king, the duke would be summoned to the capital whether he wanted to or not. If that happens, my perfectly peaceful life will also be disrupted, she thought amidst their intimacy. When we go to the capital. As Lucia pondered this, Duke Hugo gently lifted her chin, interrupting her thoughts. So you have the luxury to think about something else now? Duke Hugo asked as he leaned closer. Wait, Lucia pleaded, but Duke Hugo resumed their activities and Lucia lost herself in the moment, calling out his name seductively. When the time for their journey to the capital would arrive, Lucia dreaded the prospect of encountering the woman Duke Hugo was supposed to marry, the Duchess from her recurring dream. Rumors had circulated about their supposed contractual marriage, but the Duke never confirmed them. Perhaps all the rumors that I heard were lies and in reality, the two of them were passionately in love. Maybe I cut him off from someone who was precious to him. I can't stop thinking that way, she thought. During dinner, Duke Hugo casually mentioned Countess Corzin's impending visit the next day, leaving Lucia puzzled as she didn't know the Countess. Should I prepare to welcome a guest? Lucia inquired. She will be the teacher you requested, Duke Hugo replied. It's up to you whether to treat her as a guest or not. I understand, Lucia responded with a smile, though internally she found Duke Hugo rather aloof. Despite Jerome's tales painting the Duke as reserved and uncommunicative, Lucia hesitated to ask him questions, fearing his annoyance. Duke Hugo observed Lucia silently before divulging more information. Countess Corzin is the mother of Count Corzin, or rather, the former Countess, he explained. She's renowned as the godmother of high society in the Northern Territory. Widowed at a young age, she chose not to remarry and instead assumed leadership of the household. She's highly esteemed for her expertise in etiquette and culture, making her a sought-after teacher for noble families. Lucia's eyes widened with admiration. She sounds remarkable, she remarked enthusiastically. Isn't this a sudden request for someone like her? She must have her own schedule, Lucia expressed her concern. Duke Hugo cast a glance at Jerome, his demeanor awkward. Startled, Jerome and all the handmaids hastily excused themselves from the room, leaving Lucia bewildered. Why is everyone leaving? She wondered tensely as she was now alone with the Duke. It's not easy to ask Countess Corzin to do something even for someone like me. She's quite particular, Duke Hugo explained, stunning Lucia. She wouldn't even flinch if I pestered her own son for 100 days, he added with a hint of pride. How did you manage to get her to come then? Lucia inquired. Duke Hugo smirked. Let's just say I put in a lot of effort, he replied, his tone suggestive. Thank you, Lucia responded innocently, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was showing off. Only in words? Duke Hugo prompted, expecting something in return. It can't be, Lucia murmured to herself, doubting his childishness. She walked up to him and gave him a quick peck. That's all, he teased, still grinning. He deepened their kiss as he lifted Lucia, placing her on the table, eliciting a moan from her. He kissed her more as she called out, "Hugh," pushing Duke Hugo away, her cheeks flushed. You're not thinking of doing it here, are you? Lucia stuttered nervously as he gazed at her mischievously. Why not? Duke Hugo asked, leaning in, but Lucia recoiled. No, she stammered. I'll hold back if you give me a convincing reason, Duke Hugo said with a mischievous glint, unnerving Lucia. It's not appropriate to do this in the place where we eat our meals, Lucia remarked, closing her eyes. Duke Hugo chuckled, teasingly asking, then what about other places? Like the hallway or the garden? Of course not. Lucia exclaimed, her cheeks flushing. Why not? The Duke pressed. Because people might see us, Lucia replied, blushing even more. The Duke persisted, is it fine if there's no one who might see us? Can we do it in the hallway or garden if there isn't a single person inside the castle? That's... She was saying as she thought, that seems all right, as her face turned even redder. If nobody knows then it's fine, isn't it? We've done all that stuff in the bedroom anyway, we're a married couple after all, she thought, her expression serious. Duke Hugo, shocked by Lucia's serious consideration of his offer, thought with a grin, don't know, now I really want to do it. He struggled to control his urges, trying to divert his thoughts. Think about something holy, he told himself. Anyway, I don't want to do it here, Lucia confessed. Duke Hugo happily conceded, unable to go against his wife's wishes. You're going for a walk now, right? He asked after the tension between them had dissipated. Yes, Lucia affirmed. If it wouldn't bother you, shall we go together? The Duke proposed. Okay, Lucia said, looking delighted by his offer. Duke Hugo was surprised by her change in mood. I would have walked with her before, had I known she would be this happy, he thought. As they held hands and strolled around the castle, Lucia shared her plans for the garden. I'm thinking of filling the garden only with flowers this year, she said. Is it tacky to only plant flowers? Duke Hugo inquired. Lucia admitted it might be tacky but explained it was her first time planning a garden. Of course, the world of gardening is extremely profound, she said as the Duke listened intently. As they continued their walks, Duke Hugo found himself increasingly captivated by Lucia. He realized that he felt happiest when listening to her chatter. Recalling how she used to talk more and ask about various things before their first night together, he couldn't help but feel responsible for her diminished speech. It's fine even if it's a bit tiresome, he thought, so I wish she would talk more. As he watched Lucia enthusiastically share her plans, Duke Hugo listened intently. That tree! She exclaimed. The Duke was surprised when she pointed to a large tree in the middle of the garden. Yes. During the day that tree provides good shade, so I drink tea under it every morning, Lucia explained. It's been there since the castle was built, so they say it must be more than several hundred years old. Is that so? Duke Hugo asked. It looks all right. That should be the first place then, he suggested. Pardon? Lucia asked, taken aback. You know, for doing it in the garden, Duke Hugo clarified, startling Lucia, causing her to blush. What does that? She was saying as the Duke grabbed her hand. He led her under the tree as he leaned closer. Calm down or I'll really do it, he teased her, holding her waist against him. Under the shade of the ancient tree and in the cover of darkness, the two lovebirds found themselves lost in each other once again. Meanwhile, Fabian arrived, expressing his exhaustion after his journey to the capital and back. Jerome warmly welcomed his twin brother, understanding the fatigue he must be feeling as they hugged. Yeah, it's been a while, Fabian replied, tiredly. Fabian, despite his exhaustion, expressed his intention to make his report to His Excellency before retiring to bed. Jerome, understanding his brother's fatigue, offered to deliver the report instead, cautioning that His Excellency might not return at any moment. Fabian, confused, inquired about His Excellency's whereabouts, to which Jerome explained that he had gone for a walk with the lady of the house. The lady? He went for a walk with her? Fabian asked, surprised. Why are you so surprised? They are very close. They eat together almost every day, Jerome replied, astonished by Fabian's reaction. Really, since when? Fabian queried. Ever since he came back to this castle, Jerome informed him, cutting off Fabian's attempt to ask further questions. Fabian, undeterred, continued, since when did he have a taste for? Stop right there, Jerome warned, interrupting Fabian before he could finish his sentence. He never sleeps with the same woman more than 3 times, Fabian stated before receiving a punch to the stomach from Jerome. I told you to shut up. How dare you start a baseless rumor like that? Jerome reprimanded his brother as Fabian groaned in pain on the ground. I was just saying. Anyway, we don't even know yet. After all, that woman lasted for more than 1 year too. Perhaps he's just enjoying his honeymoon for a while, Fabian defended himself through the pain. Jerome wondered if Fabian was referring to Countess Falcon. Anyway, I should just go and sleep, Fabian said, making his way to his room. Tell him I'll report to him early in the morning. All right, just go already, Jerome replied, dismissing his brother. As Fabian departed, Jerome pondered on his words. He acknowledged that His Excellency had indeed been involved with Countess Falcon for more than a year, but she wasn't the only woman he had been seeing. He really is different this time, Fabian thought to himself. The next morning, Countess Corzin arrived at Taran's castle. Greetings, my lady. You may call me Madame Michelle, Countess Corzin greeted Lucia with a courteous bow as she introduced herself as Lucia just gazed at her. How distinguished of a person is she to seek an education on managing a household after marriage? Countess Corzin mused to herself. Countess Corzin recollected the letter she had received from Duke Hugo requesting a favor. Despite the polite language, she couldn't shake the feeling of coercion beneath his words. Squeezing the letter in frustration, she realized the potential damage to her reputation if she declined the Duke's request, particularly considering his well-known arrogance. It is an honor to meet you, Madame Michelle, Lucia greeted with a graceful bow, seeking to alleviate any discomfort caused by the abrupt request. Countess Corzin, surprised by Lucia's humility, assured her that it would indeed be an honor to teach her. As Lucia expressed her concerns about being a burden due to her lack of education, she led Countess Corzin into a room. When I heard she was a princess, I thought she would be quite haughty, but... Countess Corzin was musing when her thoughts were disrupted. Seated together, Lucia confessed her lack of proper education and expressed her doubts about her suitability as the lady of a duke's house. She explained how she had sought Duke Taran's assistance in finding a teacher, leading to Countess Corzin's invitation. I heard you are very extremely busy. If I have interrupted your schedule in any way, I kindly ask for your understanding. Oh, and please tell me if my speech or behavior are impolite in any way, she said to the Countess. Lucia's humility and genuine concern for etiquette impressed Countess Corzin, who reassured her with a warm smile. There is nothing more for you to learn in terms of etiquette, my lady, Countess Corzin assured Lucia, dispelling her worries with gentle encouragement. Countess Corzin gently imparted her wisdom to Lucia, explaining that etiquette is fundamentally about considering others and expressing sincere kindness. She praised Lucia for already possessing these qualities, noting her genuine heart. I am flattered, madam, Lucia said blushingly. Despite wearing a composed expression, Countess Corzin was inwardly glad she came, acknowledging Duke Taran's astuteness in recognizing people's virtues. Upon learning that Lucia had been married for 2 months, Countess Corzin encouraged her to engage in social activities, suggesting a small tea party as a suitable beginning. When Lucia inquired about the grandeur of the event, Countess Corzin advised her to start with around 10 guests, specifically suggesting the wives of the Duke's vassals. She also recommended consulting Jerome, the Duke's capable butler, for assistance. Lucia, impressed by Countess Corzin's guidance, smiled at the mention of Jerome's reputed skills. Throughout their conversation, she found Countess Corzin to be a kind and knowledgeable mentor, whose elegant demeanor and articulate speech captivated her. Observing the Countess gracefully sipping her tea, Lucia admired her charm and sophistication. Expressing her willingness to introduce Lucia to her niece for further companionship, Countess Corzin extended her support to the young Duchess. Countess Corzin, reflecting on her niece's character, described her as bright and unpretentious, noting that her presence tends to make people feel comfortable. However, she admitted with a sigh that her niece often caused trouble, leaving Lucia intrigued. Curious about the nature of her niece's escapades, Lucia pressed for details, only to learn about an incident where her niece had humiliated a friend's unfaithful fiancé by subjecting him to a rather unconventional punishment involving a pit of horse manure. Shocked by the story, Lucia's curiosity turned into a desire to befriend the Countess's niece, sensing a kindred spirit. Expressing her eagerness to meet the Countess's niece as she chuckled lightly. She will be a very good counselor for you, my lady. Her hobby is giving others advice about love, the Countess said as she grins. Lucia was surprised at the idea of the niece potentially serving as a counselor in matters of love as she was already married. Amused by Lucia's response, Countess Corzin emphasized the ongoing nature of love and marriage as she inquired about the duration of her courtship with the Duke before marriage. This prompted Lucia to reflect on her own relationship with Duke Hugo, as she wasn't familiar with the concept of courtship. In response to Countess Corzin's inquiry about her courtship with Duke Hugo, Lucia hesitated, revealing that she had only met him 3 times before their wedding. Surprised by Lucia's lack of familiarity with her husband, Countess Corzin encouraged her to share her honest thoughts about him. After a moment of contemplation, Lucia asked if she should be honest, to which the Countess replied in the affirmative. Without hesitation, Lucia admitted that her husband is self-centered. Countess Corzin, though perhaps expecting a different response, was left speechless by her honesty. Countess Corzin pondered her limited interactions with Duke Taran. She couldn't deny the rumors of his promiscuity and perceived coldness, especially considering the tearful tales of young ladies she had encountered who had crossed paths with him. Reflecting on the recent marriage of the Duke to Lucia, she mused that perhaps she still clung to romanticized notions of wedded bliss despite their sparse encounters. I suspect this princess married the Duke without truly understanding him, Countess Corzin surmised, her thoughts drifting to Lucia's earlier response that had shocked her. As Lucia divulged her observations about Duke Hugo, the Countess listened intently, her curiosity piqued. He isn't temperamental, Lucia remarked, sharing her insights. He possesses a clear sense of purpose, unwavering once his decisions are made. Cold and indifferent indeed. Puzzled by Lucia's revelations, Countess Corzin absorbed her words with rapt attention, intrigued by the portrait painted of the enigmatic Duke Hugo. It seems I may have spoken rashly, Countess Corzin admitted as she sighed. Your understanding of your husband is commendable, my lady. It indicates that you haven't lost sight of yourself, which is truly admirable. It's a delicate balance to maintain, but you've managed it admirably. Countess Korzyn continued, her gaze sincere as she said, giving your whole heart to your husband and relying on him excessively can be detrimental. If he were to vanish suddenly, it could leave you utterly shattered. This is the consequence of losing sight of oneself, Countess Korzyn cautioned Lucia, emphasizing the importance of self-awareness. Don't forget yourself, she reiterated inwardly, her tone firm with concern. Absorbing the Countess's words, Lucia affirmed silently to herself, I could never forget, even if I tried. I can never forget who I am. However, Countess Korzyn continued, advising against excessive distance from one's spouse. But don't be too distant from your husband either, she advised gently. Maintaining an appropriate closeness is crucial. An appropriate distance? Lucia echoed, taken aback by the notion. Please forgive me for asking such a personal question, Countess Korzyn began, her expression serious. But how often does His Excellency visit your chambers? She inquired, her tone cautious. Pardon? Lucia exclaimed, her cheeks flushing as she feigned misunderstanding. Oh, well, every single day, Lucia admitted, her embarrassment palpable as her cheeks flushed deeper with each passing moment. I see, the Countess responded calmly, her demeanor maintaining a sense of discretion. I needn't have worried, the Countess mused quietly to herself as she grinned. So the Duke actually is the one who's completely fallen for her, the Countess mused quietly to herself as she sipped her tea, a soft chuckle escaping her lips. In order to maintain an appropriate distance, what should I do? Lucia inquired earnestly. I'll discuss that with you later, Countess Korzyn replied with a smile, her thoughts drifting. But I don't think I need to teach you anything else about that, but... She thought to herself. Safe travels, Madame Michelle. Lucia bid farewell to the Countess as their meeting concluded. This has been very helpful for me, she said. I'm pleased to hear that, Countess Korzyn responded warmly to Lucia's gratitude. I'm sure your tea party next week will be a success as well, Countess Korzyn reassured Lucia. Thank you, Lucia replied, overwhelmed by the thought of a tea party, a smile gracing her lips. Well then, until next time, she said, bidding the Countess farewell. Yes, my lady, Countess Korzyn responded respectfully as she departed. Alone once more, Lucia let out a sigh. A tea party, she murmured to herself, contemplating the upcoming event. You're the lady of House Taran, but that doesn't obligate you to be at the forefront of high society, Countess Korzyn's words echoed in Lucia's mind, a gentle reminder of their conversation. Frankly, success in social activities requires skill, but complete avoidance isn't an option either, the Countess had advised. Do only what you find appropriate. Host a tea party or garden party approximately twice per month, exclusively for women, Countess Korzyn instructed Lucia with a reassuring smile. Lucia found the frequency reasonable. Each gathering should comprise around 10 guests, but occasionally consider expanding to accommodate up to 30, the Countess added. Upon hearing the mention of 30 guests, Lucia couldn't help but feel a sense of apprehension. To think I must hold at least 2 parties every month as a duchess, it's quite daunting, she groaned, reclining in her bedroom as she reflected on the Countess's advice. Even during my time as a countess, social events never held much appeal for me, Lucia murmured to herself, acknowledging the adjustment required of her new role. I'll need to adapt. She resolved to seek guidance from Jerome regarding these matters later, clenching her fist in determination as she prepared herself for the challenges ahead. Pardon me, my lady, a handmaiden interjected timidly, catching Lucia's attention. By any chance, could you be pregnant? The handmaiden inquired, her tone tinged with shyness. Lucia's initial shock gave way to a mixture of emotions as she processed the question. You haven't had a period in more than 2 months, the handmaiden informed Lucia, her voice tinged with concern. Perhaps you should consider getting a checkup, just in case, she suggested, her expression hopeful. No. It's nothing like that. "Don't worry about it," Lucia replied dismissively. "But, my lady, we should still call a doctor," the handmaiden persisted, her concern deepening. "I said I'm fine," Lucia responded more sharply this time, her tone leaving no room for further discussion. "I know my own body perfectly well," Lucia retorted rudely, sending a shiver of fear through the handmaiden. "Yes, my lady," the handmaiden responded, her voice trembling slightly with apprehension. As the tense exchange concluded, Lucia's demeanor shifted, her facade of arrogance giving way to a palpable sense of sadness. The handmaiden observed the change in her lady's mood but wisely refrained from further words, sensing the need for silence in the midst of Lucia's evident turmoil. Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you enjoyed what you watched, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. Your comments mean the world to us and help us improve. The next episode promises even more excitement and unexpected twists, so stay tuned as we embark on this thrilling journey together. Keep the anticipation alive, and we'll catch you in the next episode.